this is Kimberlea, and Yoga Snack is our bite-sized podcast where Robbie and I serve up nourishing discussions on yoga, astrology, nourishment, and mindset.
We mix wisdom with personal experiences to serve up quick, insightful conversations that nourish your practice and add flavor to your daily life.
Ready for a quick bite of wisdom? Let's dig in. Welcome to Yoga Snack. Today we're going to talk about Santosha, which is a Niyama in the 8 limbs of yoga. And it means contentment. Mm-hmm. You did a little prep for this. Say more.
So you've brought a teacher into my view, Douglas Brooks, Dr. Douglas Brooks.
Yes.
And I listened to a lecture with him and looking for like a sort of like a simple explanation of what exactly is Santosha and what does contentment mean. And he was explaining it sort of like you have these different flavors of Santosha, sort of like, like you've just eaten a good meal or you feel great. Or
is it the rasas? Were they the rasas?
No,
That's
I don't
okay.
think so.
Keep going.
But he was saying, like, let's say you just taken a yoga class and you feel amazing, like you feel content. Mm-hmm. There's that version of it, but then there's also like, I'm happy with my life in its entirety. Mm-hmm. And so Santosha can be those two things, but it also encompasses that whole wide range in between. Mm-hmm. It's like that whole view of what contentment is. And I like that explanation. Mm-hmm. I think it can be these little moments where you feel present in your life, but it can also be like as a whole, like looking at, okay, I lived a good life.
Yeah. I a couple years ago during teacher training, I was sort of going down this neurobiology rabbit hole, and learning more about chemicals and brain chemistry, and we were teaching the yamas and the niyamas, and I had this realization: serotonin is the contentment molecule. Yeah, like so when we dial it back, like the yogis were intuiting all of this stuff, like there is this place of contentment, like we're not clinging, we're not grasping, and it's important to still have goals in our lives and ways to express ourselves and move forward. Like I'm not saying that, but to have balanced action, because dopamine is kind of the opposite, right? And it has a different literal flavor to it when we're experiencing a dopamine hit versus being in a place of contentment where we're not striving and we're not reaching outside of ourselves for things. When I first moved into my home, it's been almost 5 years ago, but I had left my marriage and I was in this new space, and my mom helped me, get settled, and she was a big supporter of all of this and helping me get into my home. And I remember her kind of having this moment where she was like, "There's all these things that we should paint. Maybe you want to paint. Maybe these appliances need to be updated. Maybe there's all this." And I was just like, I just want to be here and not want anything for a while. Like I felt that deep inside of my soul. Like I finally was in a place where my nervous system was really settled, and I could walk into that place and not wonder how my nervous system was going to need to be, and I just wanted to be okay in my soul, right? I didn't want to feel like there's all these projects that I want to do. And I've been there for almost 5 years, and I still very much feel that. And in my previous home, some of it was just a form of creativity. I think, I did a lot of painting of the walls. I actually painted my floors and stenciled my floors and painted stripes in my girls' rooms. And I had these sort of like projects, and it always felt like things were like breaking down and needed to be replaced, or they needed to be upgraded, and they needed, there was just always this feeling of like frenzy and striving, because I think that was this smoke screen, right, that was easier to pay attention to than the underlying unrest that was really happening. And so when I finally got to a place where I didn't want things, is what I said. I don't want things for a while. And things move around a little bit, and I feel those impulses sometimes to create a little bit, but it's very much not a priority. When I come home, I just want to feel good and to settle into a home that feels cozy and that isn't asking me for things all the time too, right? And part of that is also, I was in a different phase of raising a gob of children, and that was getting less and less. My responsibility around that was getting less and less too. And so, it's just, I think that understanding too of like the contentment molecule is really important. And I want to dial this into our guts because like it's 80% of our serotonin is created in our guts.
No kidding.
Yeah, like our enteric nervous system, our belly, our intelligent belly, our serotonin is produced there. And that's why our body tells us things that we don't always want to listen to, and like when we get those butterflies or that like, digestive issues maybe, or, like our body is so wise. And so even think about like after you have maybe like a really great meal where you're satiated but not over full, and there's just like this like ease of like being in there in your body and just having that like, oh, yeah. But it's not couch potato peace, right? It's not the inability to do things. It's, I think when we really start to include it in the way that we are and we're practicing it, it does start to kind of transition into even really difficult situations where we're able to still claim some of that deep peace inside of ourselves, understanding that the outer world is still just turbulent.
Yeah. There's a distinguishing between contentment and complacency, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't want to be content to the point where we're inactive.
Yeah.
Like we're yogis, so like we build the energy in our body so we can go out and do the things we want to do in our life.
Mm-hmm.
And
but there's an undertone, right, to it then of peace and contentment. And I think that has to do with our nervous system, right, being able to stay somewhat regulated even inside of difficult situations. And that's hard to do, right? Because some things demand and it's necessary for us to go into action and to take care of things. But if we're in that place all the time, it's like, are we actually being effective?
Right.
And that word, before we started recording, I talked about skillfulness, right? Like being skillful in the world is the invitation of yoga. Like the world is going to churn, the ocean's going to churn us, right? No matter what, like the world's going to keep moving on. And we can enter it and just flop around and wonder why it's flopping us around and why it's happening to me and what is going on and how come me and why, and I just didn't come with the things I need. And really that's life. Like that is a way of being in the world. And I'm not saying it's bad or wrong, but I'm really lucky that yoga came into my life and it invited me into this place of being more skillful and paying more attention. I'm not saying I'm killing it. I'm getting it right. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying like winner, chicken dinner, but I do know that the way that I move through the world is so much different. And it's because I've developed these practices and the yamas and niyamas are part of it, and how, the asana was such a big part of my self-development in my own nervous system and my body. And some of it is like, how can you be okay with your thigh burning in Warrior 2?
right.
Can you actually be okay with it and not over-identify or project and say the teacher's being so mean and how much longer and why me and, all of those things, because I do all that. And how do we get to a place where we can accept the intensity of life and still be deeply okay depths of our heart, it takes practice.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes noticing that that's not being achieved to notice that it even exists.
Absolutely.
You know?
100. I think that has to actually happen first, right? And there's a lot of spiritual bypassing. The Santosha is tricky, right? Like there's a lot of like good vibes only, man.
Right.
Peace and love only. Like don't be coming at me with your, shade or, whatever. And I'm like, life is trickier than that. There are all of these, that's why I asked about the rasas. There's all these flavors that life comes in, and can we allow that to be part of it? Oh, what happened there?
I don't know.
There are balloons on the screen, you guys. I don't know.
Maybe.
I think
maybe
your
a
finger
little
gesture?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay.
We're getting distracted. ADHD, superpower unite.
Right. It's a celebration here on the Yoga
Yeah, indeed. It's a party all the time. But how can you allow those that flavorful life? And I think that's why, like, when we started all of this, it's like pick your flavor, because I think we show up with a certain disposition, and to own it and to claim it. And inside of that claiming of it, it's not to get so stuck in it that we over-identify with it, but it's like, okay, this is the way I've shown up. Now, how can I create practices that help me become a more skillful version of myself? And that included is that practice of Santosha. It's not to be okay with everything. There are really some awful things that are happening right now, and unfair things. And it's to know that that's part of the world that we live in, and it's still a privilege to be here, and that we can engage with it skillfully, but it's our responsibility to really go deep inside of our own selves and to work deep in ourselves first, knowing that ability to maintain a peaceful presence in the difficulty of life is one of the hardest things and most necessary things to do. And I don't know that everybody's actively engaging in finding that, right? So instead of walking through the world being dysregulated and needing stuff to be different all the time, I think it's a different skill set to actively claim contentment and to pursue contentment, if we can even pursue it. I think it's more of an allowing thing, that we let life be what it is, and we still understand it's a precious privilege to be here, and that it's hard to be here too. And there's a term in Buddhism, it's called upeksha. I sometimes will teach a class on this, and it was explained to me, it's the opposite of James Bond's martini. It's shaken, not stirred. So we get, when we're in a place of upeksha, it's like we're calm and centered in our heart. Even though the outside surface of the world shakes us up, or stirs us up, I should say, we're not shaken to our core anymore.
I like that. Because, like, the way all this was sort of explained to me is that, like, we come into this world and samadhi, essentially, like, we're here in our purest form, and then, for lack of a better analogy, like, the world takes a dump on our doorstep. and then we sort of try to scramble back to that place the rest of our life, until we find these practices that maybe sort of take that static electricity away from the process of we can sort of relax into the process of finding contentment, I think, without having to, I guess, work towards it.
Yeah. Well, Douglas Brooks, in a lecture I took from him one time, he actually talks about, and I'm not going to do the story justice, so not that he would ever hear this podcast, but if you do, Douglas, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do the story justice, but he talks about how his teacher was telling him about this boy who had a pet pig, who was, and the boy's this is India. He's naked. He's running around. He's got this pet pig, and it's just, it's rural India. And the boy, because he's young, he just stops and takes a shit in the field. And the pig runs over and eats the shit. And his teacher is like, how beautiful. And, Douglas's face was like, what? Like, how is that beautiful? That he's eating shit. But the thing is like, that's life. Like, this is actually life. Like, this is what happens. And we can constantly get offended by stuff that doesn't actually deserve our time and attention. Or we can actually start to turn and look at things like, oh, wow, look at that. Yeah. And I'm not doing, like I said, I'm not doing the story justice, but it's like, that's part of it. Like, part of the play is you get shit on. People betray you. Things are unfair. It's part of the gig. And it's still worth engaging in and finding beauty and learning to be at peace in our hearts and not be, so passively content that we still can't take action in the world. So life does shit on your doorstep when you show up. And what a gift!
Right.
Whenever you grab, you're like, oh, look at this pile of shit.
You wake up.
I'm not asking for it, right? But what if we didn't get so offended by it all the time, or think that we're doing it wrong all the time? I think that's what I'm really starting to embrace. Like, this is just part of the gig.
Getting it wrong.
Exactly.
Ram Dass likes to talk about, there are atrocities happening around the world, and I don't want this to come off as bypassing in any way, but Ram Dass would talk about how there are no errors in the game. And that things are happening, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. I think there's an element of letting go of that need for things to look a certain way.
Right.
And that sort of gets us out of that feeling of contentment. Just that sort of that striving. It's like when you're not in contentment, you're not present. When you're looking towards the future or in the past, how can you be content with the present?
Yeah. I think it was Abby Wambach. One time, she's a soccer player. She's married to one of my favorite authors, Glennon Doyle. But Abby was an Olympic and world champion soccer player, and she was talking about how unfair it was, the pay discrepancy as a professional athlete for women. And you should be lucky that you're getting paid. You should feel lucky that you're getting paid or whatever. And she had this immense amount understanding that she was in such a privileged position to make a living as an athlete and as a woman, right? And she said, I got to a place where I understood it was okay to be grateful and to want more simultaneously. And that was a really big thing. And that's kind of what I feel like with contentment. It's okay to know, to be at peace in our hearts, but to know that things need to change. And that change then is coming from that. I think contentment probably allows us to access more powerful parts of ourselves where it's not based off of fear and scarcity, and that actually makes us more powerful in the world. That's kind of how I think of it.
Yep.
But we're not good vibes only and spiritually bypassing everything, but it's, I think it's complicated, right?
Sure.
And we're always looking for this maybe, or at least I am, I don't want to project everybody, but this straightforward, this one answer. And yoga is always going to dish us up a paradox to hold on to. And it's not only are you going to hold this, you're going to have to know in what quantity to hold it under any given circumstance.
Yeah. Before I took teacher training, I would listen to podcasts that had, Buddhist thinkers or people who were in yoga. And there was always this maybe try it this way, but also this is good too. And I was always like, what is this? And then when I got into teacher training, it was like, that seemed to be the answer for everything. Like, try to find alignment here, but also this is good too if this is how it feels. If this feels good in your body, this is good too.
Yeah, because yoga is an experiential practice. The experience that you're having is valid and true and real and should be included in what you're studying or how you're moving through the world. Because so often we've been like, it's all out there. We're going to one day understand and get it, and then we'll be able to apply it. But yoga is like 99% practice and 1% theory. I think Patabi Joyce said that. But it's true. I mean, we think that it's like yoga is like this thing you do on your mat and you go and you exercise or stretch and breathe or you meditate. And that's part of it. Like, we need active practices to really consolidate the skills that we're trying to build. It would be like a dancer taking a technique class and then going and taking an improv class where they can really go and express and expand, but they've got this technique underneath them that they can go out now and find this expression in the world. I like that. And that's what our practices are doing, but it's still 99% you're practicing in your life. It just may not be a formal practice, right? And those formal practices, I think, rein us in and help us remember, and it builds community and, all these other things too. But yeah, your experience is valid, and, we want to validate our experiences, but we don't want to over-identify with them and let them have them limit us in our ability to build skills. Like, we need skills. We need skills in this life, and that's yoga. It's skill in action.
Yeah.
It's show up. Don't just show up randomly. It's like show up intentionally and purposefully and do the best you can, knowing that at the end of the day you still might not get what you wanted, or you may not be able to make a difference even. But that's not the point. The point is to show up, be present, and be as skillful as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like...
And to be kind and content in your heart.
Yes. Life is like that little pop quiz that just gives you where you're at, where you need to study more. You just notice. Yeah. Notice. Okay, I got a 60% on this one. Maybe I should study a little bit more.
I might need a little more formal tutoring.
Right. Exactly. A little more practice in this area.
Well, if you need a tutor, you guys reach out to us. We'll be happy to tutor you. But tutors don't know it all either.
Exactly.
So,
tutor us at the same time.
Indeed. Yeah, we should be learning from each other. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. And I hope you guys have been enjoying this. We're going to try to, what did you say, bring a little juice into the podcast, mix things up just a little bit. So stay tuned, and we appreciate you guys listening. I love your comments. Your likes actually matter. Your comments matter tremendously, and even sharing it with someone you think might resonate with it. We just want to keep doing this. So thank you guys so much, and
see you next time.
We'll see you next time.